So this is all set up. Just to let you know, the mics are on. I think theoretically, if anybody's on the webinar right now, they might be able to hear you. It's just an FYI. Yep. Then call on how The only thing you got to do, I'm just going to suggest this real quick.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to the policies and laws of climate panel today. We have these four lovely panelists. If you are here for a class and require credit, please sign in at the sign in the front corner, either right now, before, or after, whenever it's most convenient for you. We will have some online participants through Zoom, so I may be relaying some questions from them as well. To get this started, we will start with each panelist will get 5 minutes to introduce themselves, a little bit about themselves and how they relate to this career and this pathway. And then we will open up for discussion. This can be Q&A, this can be just general discussion questions as well. So we'll start with you for 5 minutes.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You gave us a preview of what you're talking about.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me here, and thank you all for being here. So I'm a professor of economics at the college, and I'm not an expert on climate change by any means. But I do have an interest in the subject just as it pertains to economics in general. I try to talk a little bit about it in one of the classes that I teach, just because I think it's a really important topic. So did you want us to actually go ahead and do our 5 minutes now?
Yes.
Also, okay. So I thought it would be interesting to talk a little bit about how climate change affects your grocery bill. Maybe it's something that we can all relate to. So there's been a lot of talk in the last few years about inflation and how much inflation has increased in the US. Inflation is when prices go up. And most people think that it's because of, and legitimately so, because of, supply chain shortages and things like that are happening as a disruption due to the pandemic. But there are actually some components of it that are very closely related to climate change. And that's what I wanted to talk about. And two of the products that I wanted to focus on in particular, very dear to my heart. One of them is coffee. And the other is olive oil, both of which I use very much on a daily basis. So forgive me for using some facts, but I'm an economist and I deal with statistics. So if I'm going to talk to you about anything, I have to have some numbers to go along with it. So just a little bit of perspective. In 2022, the US incurred about $2 billion worth of costs related to weather-related events, so extreme weather. And this includes Hurricane Ian, it includes droughts, heat waves, etc. So some of the products that we produce, some of the agricultural products that we produce that were affected by this include things like lumber, cotton, wheat, and of course, energy, which is not an agricultural product, but which is integral to pretty much everything that we do. So globally, this is again, just going back a couple of years, the price of food increased in many other countries around the world. And just to give you some perspective, you probably know how much prices increased in the US if you went out to restaurants and you bought groceries and things like that. But other countries were actually hit a lot harder than us, especially those that don't have a large agricultural base. So for instance, in Nigeria, food prices went up 24%, and in Egypt, food prices went up 63%. And a lot of this was due to the price of grain, which those countries use quite a bit. So one of the things that is predicted to happen, and this is the International Labor Organization that looks at statistics on work and labor and things like that, is that the number of hours that people work globally is supposed to drop by about 2% over the next couple of decades. That may sound not a lot, but when you look at the entire global workforce, it actually results in several $1,000 billion worth of lost output. And that is going to cause a lot of prices to go up, including things like the price of food. Another thing that relates to the price of food is transportation. So if we're importing certain types of food and it's being shipped,
You have a minute left on your time if you want to wrap up a little bit, please.
Oh, okay. okay, I'm not gonna talk about coffee and olive oil in that case. I should have practiced this, but I didn't. So I'm just gonna say the very last thing, which is, transportation is another aspect of it that is also, affected. So the Panama Canal, which is where, a big, transportation route for a lot of the agricultural products that are shipped to the US, had to decrease the amount of shipping that goes through it by 40% because the water level was so low that the ships could not carry the normal load that they have. So that is a really big factor that's going to affect a lot of food prices, especially in the coming decades. Okay, I'm going to end right here. If we get a chance to talk about coffee and olive oil later on, I will. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm Sharice Haas. I'm the environmental manager at Kennedy Valve. We're a large manufacturing company that's been a cornerstone of Elmira since 1907. We employ over 300 people at our facility, and we try to integrate our community in a lot of the different things that we do. But anybody here familiar with Kennedy Valve? Anybody's family work at Kennedy? Usually, what do they do? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what we build. Fire hydrants, which are probably out on your streets right now. You'll see our stamp on the fire hydrants and waterworks valves. So part of what we have to do in order to build those is we melt about 54 100 tons of ductile and gray iron in furnaces every single year in order to make all these products. So in order to make these products with iron, which is scrap that we get in, so we recycle all that scrap metal in the first place by pulling in the scrap and remelt it and creating new ductile iron and gray iron pipes for valves and waterworks. All different colors. If you go all over the place, you can get them in orange, red, yellow, whatever. We offer facility tours. Kennedy Valve also offers a lot of scholarships to students who are in technical programs right now. I don't know if you've watched the local TV news, but we're offering a couple of scholarships there. But part of my job is to make sure that we're compliant with all of the New York State DEC or the US EPA's Clean Air Act, water, land, whatever it is. So essentially, I'm in charge of everything that's gonna potentially go outside our facility. Who's gonna be exposed, and that's part of our local community as well. Some of the other projects that we have going on right now, you might have heard about, or it's coming out in the news, you'll see. In order to comply with our Clean Air Act, we're having to build a 110-foot stack on the side of our facility, which will combine the exhaust emissions that are coming out of our facility into one stack to reduce those emissions that we'll be releasing into the air because of the result of melting all of that iron. We're also able to this year realign some of our hazardous waste. We generate about 54 tons of one particular waste stream of hazardous waste that we're able to reassign now to a non-hazardous waste stream. And we'll have about a 33% return on investment on that. So not only are we going to reduce all of our waste, but we're also going to reduce our bottom line in economics with that. One small little project that we're working on right now is basically just replacing all of our shop rags throughout the facility, which might seem small, but in the big scheme of things, we were using these throwaway ripped up t-shirts, which is kind of great. And everybody's like, oh, let's recycle all these t-shirts and sweatshirts and stuff. However, by doing that, we were also disposing of over 11,000 pounds of waste by disposing of those rags just in the regular trash. So now with a different vendor, we're going to be recycling and rewashing our shop rag program. And in the long run, it'll actually save us $20,000 a year. So that's kind of a dual benefit with that as well.
We do have 1 minute left if you would like to wrap up.
Yeah, sure. A couple other fun things that we're doing is we'll be planting some trees out on our North Yard facility this year because maybe some of you know the biggest bang for your buck right now is planting trees. They're talking about it across the way at one of the tables right now. And Rachel, I thought was going to be joining us here. She's part of that tree project for our county right now. So we're planting trees and for Arbor Day, giving away a lot of trees just to our employees as well. So any questions later, feel free to ask.
Hi, my name is Kelly Smith Frank, and I am here as a volunteer with the local chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby. Citizens Climate Lobby is an organization of tens of thousands of volunteers with a few paid staff who advocate for bipartisan climate policies that will address the climate crisis. So we, over the last over a decade, have been meeting with as many members of Congress as possible, trying to be in as many congressional districts as possible, and having volunteers meet with our congressmen and women and try to find common ground with them on what we can do to what any individual congressional representative can get on board with to address the climate crisis. We really strongly believe that but it's very important to us to try to find common ground with anybody. And we believe that most people, almost anybody, can find something that they already value that actually is connected to climate. And we try to help people make that connection. And so over the course of the time that our many volunteers have spent doing advocacy, we have chosen a few policies that we focus on that we think can get the most support and can address the climate crisis in a way that also protects people, protects the economy, and can get buy-in from both sides. Reforestation is one of those things. Everybody loves trees. So, but our main policy that we pour a lot of energy into is an economic policy called carbon fee and dividend. And so it's a carbon pricing policy. You might be familiar with the idea of a carbon tax, right? Where anyone who is introducing fossil fuels onto the market will pay a certain amount for the greenhouse gas content of those fossil fuels. And generally, anytime this is suggested or introduced, that amount is set small at the beginning, and then it increases over time. So the impact of putting a price on fossil fuel emissions is that it incentivizes anyone, but in particular companies, to look a few years ahead and say, in a few years, this price will have increased to whatever amount. And it's going to be more expensive for us to purchase fuels that are fossil fuel heavy. And so we'll want to make plans to plan ahead and make sure that our profits are safe in the coming years. So it creates a shift in the economy to move people away from fossil fuels. On the other side is the dividend. So, and this is, I think, the policy that fewer people have heard about. But what do you do once you collect money from carbon prices? What do you do with the money? And the dividend in a carbon fee and dividend is that the money collected would be paid out to American households based on the amount of people in the household. So like similar to some of the stimulus payments that were made during the pandemic. It's just based on the number of people. And what that does is it makes sure that the money stays circulating in the economy. It protects people who don't have a lot of extra money to spend on, prices changing or fluctuating with carbon price. And it ultimately creates a net benefit for, a lot of people who are making sustainable choices or who just don't have a large carbon footprint. And because it keeps the money circulating in the economy, it also gets the money back to those businesses who, then are using the money to make the shifts that they need to make. So,
All right, that one, Mark, if you'd like to wrap up, please.
okay. Any questions if you'd like to talk about carbon pricing policy? I'm happy to do so. I'll also throw in on a different note that I also work as an engineer in the solar energy industry. And so I've, kind of gotten to see the trajectory of that industry over the last 8 years, and how that's changed. So if you have any questions that you want to direct about that as well, I'm happy to talk about that. Thank you.
I'm Alexis Rittenberger. I am undergraduate faculty for the Information Technology Management Program here at Elmira, and I'm the Director of Teacher Education and the Director of Graduate and Professional Studies. So I see a lot of folks out on their devices right now. And how many of you are using the cloud right now? Yeah, it's okay. I see you on them. So I know you guys are, right? There are some other folks, okay? So did you know that the cloud actually has a greater carbon footprint than the airline industry currently? So a single data center can consume the equivalent electricity of 50,000 homes, right? So if we think about, I know, it's unbelievable. So why do you think that is? What kinds of electricity or what impact does a data center have on our electrical needs? What do you think? What's one thing? What do you know about a data center? What do you know about, do you know anything about a data center? What is a data center? A couple of you, I had an MIS. What's a data center?
Isn't it just like a larger room of computers that keeps everyone's data in one location that then can be sent out to wherever it needs?
Yes, exactly. So it's a warehouse filled with computers and servers, right? So computers get really hot. So we have to cool those things off. And how do we cool those things off?
Fans.
Fans, air conditioners. So they'll have air conditioners running constantly, right? And they oftentimes are a mobile air conditioner. I can't even sit down. Can I stand up?
Yes.
Okay. So, so if we think about these air conditioners, right, there are these mobile units and they'll say, all right, we've got a lot of heat in zone 3. So these things are always running at a low level and then they rush them off, right, to zone 3, put them on high so we can cool that off immediately, right? The other way they're cooling data warehouses is using water. So they will in deserts a lot, right? We have a lot of data centers in Arizona where there's big flat spaces, real estate is cheaper. So they're using shipping containers for data storage, right? So you have a shipping container and it's got all of these computers in it managing our data. And they have to irrigate them, right? So they have to spray off the whole shipping container with water to cool it off, right? So there are some new technologies that are also using water within like the framework, within the mainframe to cool it. So we're cooling the water and then we're circulating it through the servers. Then we're cooling it again because the water gets hot, right? So we automatically have some level of evaporation. There has been some discussion of moving some of these data centers to colder climates, like to Iceland, to Nordic countries. Do you think that's a good idea or a bad idea? Good? Who said good? Yeah, why? Possibly, right? So that's one argument. What's an argument against moving them there? Could be, right? And we have to think about how much and how congested that space would be, right? So the reason why spaces like Arizona and flat desert areas, those are really easily accessible in terms of that. But if we're thinking about colder climates, are those accessible all months of the year? Or are we limited to our access in terms of like snowfall and ice and things like that? Also, okay, awesome. I got tons of facts if you need them. But so I really like this this person. He's an MIT, he's a doctoral student currently. His name is Stephen Gonzalez Marcete. And he's actually a cloud anthropologist. So he did this huge ethnographic project in data warehouses and data farms. So you can Google him or you can contact me and I will send you his info. But he's got some really great videos just explaining some of this impact. And if we think about anthropology and how now we are studying this anthropology of the cloud and all of the impacts that it has on us. And I can talk about sound at another time, but my minute's gonna be up.
Perfect timing. Perfect. With all of you guys.
Thank you for sticking with within the 5 minutes. Really appreciate it.
It's hard for us.
At this point, we are going to be opening up for any conversations or discussions you have. You can start off with one small tangent and branch into whatever topics you guys want to at this point. As also for the Zoom audience, if you guys have any questions or comments or concerns.
Ah, Neha, I'm so glad you asked. Whip out my index cards and give you some of those facts about it. Yeah, okay, so olive oil, as you probably know, is grown in Southern Europe. That produces most of the world's olive oil. And one of the things that's been happening in the last few years is Southern Europe has gotten much hotter than it used to be. So I don't know if anybody's France, Spain, or Italy. I know we do have a few students from Italy. So the summers have become hotter and drier. And so first of all, there's lack of rainfall, but then also there have been periods with a lot of rainfall, like excessive rainfall. And what's happened is there are these olive groves that have existed for centuries. The southern heel of Italy. So if you can picture a map of Italy and the heel of the boot, right? The region that a lot of the olive groves are in is in that region. It's called Puglia. And one of the things that's happened is that a bacterium that was actually introduced from Costa Rica has now thrived over there because of the fact that temperatures have gotten so much warmer. And it's literally decimated a lot of the olive groves. So I think it was either last year or the year before that, that for the first time, Italy actually imported olive oil. So like you think about Italy as like, you know, a country that exports olive oil, right? A lot of the olive oil that you buy is from there, but they actually had to import it because they did not produce enough, even for their own domestic use. And then another, I think Spain has also had very serious problems with olive oil production. So in last fall, I don't know how many of you buy olive oil or how much you pay attention to it, but I use olive oil a lot. So I noticed this. So the price of olive oil was up 117%. That basically means almost double, like a little bit more than double. And weight for weight, it was 17 times more expensive than crude oil, like the stuff we put in our cars. So that has impacted it a lot. And then coffee. Should I keep going? Or would you like me to? Yeah. Okay. We're still interested in this topic, right, guys? Yeah. Okay. So kind of a similar story with coffee. So you can kind of divide up coffee production into two main varieties of coffee beans. One is Arabica, which is the one that is about 70% of world production, which is probably what most of you drink. If you like coffee, that's probably what you drink. And the other is called Robusta. So Arabica is grown in Central America, South America, and Central Africa. Robusta is grown in Southeast Asia. Most of the world likes Arabica. That's just the taste of the, the acidity, etc., that we prefer. But a similar story is happening with coffee. A lot of the areas that are prime coffee growing areas are becoming not so friendly in terms of habitat for coffee because of the climate. So, same issue, either excessive drought, excessive rainfall, something or the other related to that. So there's some estimates that suggest that Brazil, which is one of the largest coffee growing places in the world, by the end of this century, between 35 to 75% of the land that's currently used for growing coffee is not it's not coffee, the coffee bean will not survive there. Arabica plants will not be able to be grown there. So the problem has become so serious and coffee prices have gone up quite a bit that scientists have actually started searching for different varieties of coffee plants that might be more drought resistant. And they've actually come up with one that was discovered in 1902 in the Republic of Congo. It's called Excelsa. So you might be seeing a new variety of coffee sometime in the next, I don't know how long it will take for them to sort of refine this, but it's a variety that existed before, but then kind of went away because of pests that attacked it. But it is a much more drought tolerant and higher temperature tolerant variety. And in taste tests, this is important for those of us that like our coffee, it compares very favorably to Arabica. So that's one of the more promising avenues of research that might help save us coffee drinkers. But yeah, I mean, there will be some changes, especially in terms of where coffee is grown. So.
Does anyone else have any added questions about that or other topics that they would like to talk about? I know you in the blue shirt, you raised your hand. Did you have something else to share? Was it the same topic?
I was gonna have.
How cold is too cold? Usually I would say like consistently less than 30 degrees is gonna cause a problem in terms of data production. What happens is they create their own heat, right? So all of the fans and things, and if you've ever seen like these data warehouses or a server room, right? You have a frame and you've got like, 10, 20 different servers on there, and so they each have their own fan, they're feeding off of each other, they're vibrating, they're creating heat. So even a small fan or a small air conditioning unit might not satisfy that need for a very small place, right? So we have historically, or I shouldn't say historically, very recently, the cloud is so cheap, right? So schools like ours are not maintaining our own servers necessarily in terms of backups. We see that as not safe, right? So we use on campus, we keep things on campus that we absolutely necessarily need to have here, things that our IT department or that people on staff can maintain. So it's a lot cheaper perspective to purchase the cloud, right? I can go on Amazon Web Services right now and purchase, huge terabytes of information for a project that I'm working on, for a big data project I'm working on, and then I can cancel it in 24 hours, right? So we see this as a very disposable product, but our culture is about redundancy. It's about wanting to be able to get my Instagram photos exactly when I want my Instagram photos, where I want them. So we have these data centers all over the world, and those are what we are using to consume our data constantly. And this has happened to all of us. Like, we want to make a purchase because they're having a sale on our favorite website. And we're like, yeah, I've got another 2 hours to do it. And you're on there and you're clicking and the website's not working. And you're super angry about that. But it is because of that anger that we then are building more and more data centers because, right, whatever the company is, doesn't want to lose our business. and we demand it, because if I can't get that sale, am I gonna go back to that company again? Possibly not, right? So there, it's cheaper to maintain a duplicate server 10 times over than it is to lose your business, right? So we need to start thinking about how we as consumers use information and our expectations of information. What happens when the server is down? And how do we protect those servers? So you've got kind of this challenge of cybersecurity and protection. You have the functions of AI and all of us using ChatGPT to assist us in various ways, right? That is all just a suck on our data centers. And then we think about the thousands of photos we take every day and store them to the cloud, because why not, right? It was like 5 cents. It's free, it's cheap. I have the unlimited plan. I don't care. But it's really about that larger global impact. And how could we possibly, and I mean, I think that's a question for all of you here. How do we reframe our thinking to say, yeah, me hitting that like red sweater button is just continuing to fire onto a problem that's already occurring, right? So there's a lot of innovation going into how can we make, and this is a really interesting statistic I found in terms of Bitcoin. Hold on. So where you go? First, yeah, blockchain. So blockchain actually cut their energy use. They went to hyper efficient servers. They cut their energy use by 99% by changing all of their servers into highly efficient servers. But Bitcoin, on the other hand, so any of you into cyber currency, right? Bitcoin has refused to follow that suit. And so they're saying that carbon emissions are not their problem because there's no police for that. And that's challenge, right? So Google and several other companies have said that they would be interested in following something like, so Europe has a climate neutral data center pact. So it's basically a pact to go climate neutral by 2050, and that's in Europe. But the United States, like, we can't get our act together. I know you're all surprised about that, but we can't get our act together because nobody has the bandwidth to police these things. And how do we, with such a diverse environment, right? You're talking about from, Canada side, right, down to Arizona and deserts, right? How do we create policies that are applicable for that kind of environment? And I think that's where like your group kind of comes in on a local level. So all kinds of stuff. So when you're using ChatGPT and you're like, yeah, it's free version. Nope.
No, so the idea is that every American gets it. So, so it would depend on exactly how the law is written, but basically the idea is like the government has to know that you exist, right, for you to get the check. So the purpose of that, it's not like as a loan, it's just to basically you can think of it like, companies that pollute are creating like a negative externality. They're creating a problem for somebody else, right? And companies that are introducing fossil fuels into the market are doing that. That's what the carbon price is making them pay for. Well, who should they be paying? Who are they hurting? Everybody should get, part of that payment because it's contributing to climate change. We're all, we all suffer from climate change. So that means like, if you work at a fossil fuel company, you'll also get a check, right? Like it's taking that, it's creating an incentive for, fossil fuel companies, other companies, individuals, for everybody to make more sustainable choices. But it's also you know, putting a little bit of money back in your pocket, just because you're a person. And what that does, to get a little more granular on it. If you look at the different income quintiles, there's been some modeling done on this policy. Looking at how it impacts different groups of people. And so the bottom income quintile ends up, in the two different studies that were done on this, somewhere between 94 and 96% of people in the bottom income quintile either break even or come out ahead with like how much extra they pay for things that, you know, are impacted by fossil fuel costs versus how much money they're getting from their check. Now that's part of the reason that effect exists, is that people who spend, like, our carbon footprint tends to be proportional to our spending. So like if you're spending very little money, you're actually, you might feel like you're polluting because you're paying, you know, because you're more sensitive to the cost of your energy, but you're actually like not polluting as much as people who are spending more. And then, you know, in the top income quintile, it's, I forget the exact number, but it's somewhere in the 40% of people either break even or come out ahead. So there, it's reflecting choices that people are making, right? So everybody has the option, you know, everybody who, you know, in general, like if you're coming out behind because you're spending more money on fossil fuel intensive products or energy, you have options to make a different decision, and the dividend helps you have the money to do that. But, you know, if you're coming out ahead, you might just be okay, like with the lifestyle that you have. Yeah. The other thing that it does is, studies have shown that when you give money to people who are very low income, they are more likely to spend that money right away than people who are middle class or upper class. So by just giving a check to everybody, you know, people who are struggling are going to keep spending that money. It's going to keep money circling in the economy, and that produces a protective effect for the economy. While, you know, these are some big changes going on in the economy. So it allows a way for those big changes to happen while it's also protective of the economy.
Do we have any other questions or anything like that you want to share?
So in the process of melting the iron, we capture the melt dust that comes off of that melting process. So we capture all of those dust emissions, particulates, and they goes through a big, huge, you can see if you go past our facility, you see these big, huge tubes. They're like 4 feet across, 5 feet across. And the melt goes through them with a big auger, and it pushes all that dust out, and you capture them in big, like 2,000-pound bags at a time. And so for a really long time, we would get some hits of some metals, and depending on which metals it would fall into the toxic category. So if you know anything about soils and the toxic leaching concentration tests, TLC, we probably wouldn't have necessarily identified it as hazardous by the EPA standards, but because our standards at Kennedy Valve are much higher, we would say, well, we're seeing these toxic metals in here, and we're going to take it a step further and classify it as hazardous, take a best practice approach on it, and say we're going to remove that waste as a hazardous waste. So instead, this year, because they're really trying to push us to change the way that we're doing things, try to reduce our energy. You know, we have these huge goals of reducing waste and reducing energy. What can we do? So we will test every single sack of melt dust that we generate before we dispose of it. And so because it can be reclassified as a non-hazardous waste, because we're not meeting that hazardous waste threshold for those toxic metals, we'll be able to dispose of it. It'll still go to a regular hazardous waste type of facility. It's not like we're sending it to the landfill. But it'll just be managed in a different way. So the way that waste is classified as a characteristic waste or by process, we were able to reclassify that as a non-hazardous waste. But it does take that out of there. But what that also does too is, I don't know if you're much into, anybody who's much into environmental. I started off in health science and had an environmental emergency response concentration. So waste response and oil response and all that is kind of the background of what I've always done. So trying to get away from managing hazardous wastes, in our opinion, is gonna save us money, but it's also better for the environment because we're able to take that and not have to use so much energy to reprocess that waste in a different way by incineration or, you know, burying it into a, you know, cement bermed kind of facility or something like that. So that's how we did that. But if you want to know more about waste, let me know.
So does anyone have any other topics that they want to know more about or questions that seem vaguely related, but those also work? Thanks again.
Is there any cost benefit analysis for having your data centers in the Southwest where solar is very, very, very cheap? Versus
I don't have that data. I know actually, popular opinion is against moving those things to cooler climates because of accessibility. And so it seems that there would be actually more immediate negative environmental effects by trying to move a data center to Norway or Iceland because of just those natural habitats that was going to be actually probably more disruptive than trying to figure out ways to keep data centers where they currently are and manage those systems. And I think the question right now is really about how can we become more efficient and less in demanding of those materials? Because, and I don't know if I have the statistics in front of me right now. Oh yeah, so 6 to 12% of the energy consumed in a data center is the computational process. Everything else is simply maintenance and cooling, right? So if we think about like what our actual needs are, it's at the most 12% of what those things cost. So we'll be better off to look at how we can more efficiently do that. Moving them to cooler places does not seem to be the answer. And I don't know exactly why, the science behind that, but there was a lot of discussion, and maybe it was where they were looking because they could have been looking at like environmentally protected places and they were like killing the last dodo. I have no idea what that research was, but it's a really interesting topic. I think where that industry is going right now is looking more at how we can replenish water and use water as a better solution. So how can we create more waterproof servers? How can we reduce the evaporation and just keep using that? So there is some research on like a geothermal effect and how maybe we could build the data centers over top of like geothermal farms. And then, you know, but I don't have the results of those studies yet.
College. I don't know if you have any knowledge on this topic at all, that relates to that though, that could possibly be my is so have they looked into like fiber optic use in the computers? Possibly, because I know that can increase data transfer and the amount of data stored, so that could decrease the amount of computers they make.
Right, and yeah, and I think that would probably also, I don't know about that. I think that would also though decrease as well, right, the heat
Yeah.
intake. I don't know, I think that's something you should take to Corning, incorporate it.
Yeah.
I don't have any contacts there right now, does anybody?
I went and chatted with them, and they were actually already looking at fiber optic use.
Yeah.
in Computers and stuff, but they said one of the things that is an issue with them is money, because a lot of companies still want to buy copper and all of
Yeah.
that. Because
Right,
it benefits them.
right,
That's
exactly.
Not a lot of places are looking into that as much because of.
Yeah, I feel like you need like a really top security clearance at Corning Inc. to get more information on that,
Yeah,
but if
so
you
that's what
do.
they told me that this is the base level that we can tell you.
Right,
We
look me
can't-
up, because that would be super interesting. I mean, and also, I don't know in terms of waste of fiber optic,
Right,
like
yeah,
how that works, like, can it all be recycled?
Right.
Or- I don't know enough about
Yeah.
fiber optics. Next time, I'll have it ready for you.
I do have a question about the coffee oil. Is there anything that we can do as consumers to help this? Buy from certain brands or maybe cause us to give to or anything like that?
I mean, I think as far as the future of some of those products. I don't think it's anything necessarily that the growers are doing or that, you know, I mean. The ethics of the whole industry, especially when you talk about coffee growing, is that's a kind of like almost an entirely different subject, because there's such a gap between what farmers who grow a lot of these products receive for their crops and what the middle person who's then, you know, buying and then selling to the big producers, right? That's not necessarily really related that much to climate change. It just has to do with the way the industry is set up. So, yeah, I mean, if you look for fair trade types of products and things like that, that's true for chocolate as well as coffee. You know, you can support some of those more kind of efforts to get more money to the stores. Yeah, as far as you know, the impact of climate change on those crops, I mean, I think it just has to do with our carbon footprint in general, right? But that's like where the whole externality issue that you were talking about comes in, right? I mean, you know, a few people doing something is not gonna have a big impact, and then, you know, the whole idea of free riding, where everybody else gets to enjoy the benefits of somebody else's action, kind of prevents us from all kind of collectively taking that step, but that's why you need like government policies and their international laws and things like that. That's where they come in and why they're important. I think the thing that Alexis mentioned, the fact that all these other cryptocurrency makers are, you know, have switched to these energy efficient servers, but Bitcoin kind of is doing its own thing because there's no law that's requiring it, right?
I mean, that was in the news,
Yeah.
right? Like Ithaca, they were looking at having a cryptocurrency mining center there, and it was a huge issue. It ended up passing, right? And so,
In Ithaca?
yeah, I know,
I'm
right?
shocked.
Exactly, me
Oh
too.
my God.
But
Yeah.
it's pretty frightening, right? When we think about
Yeah.
like, so that is something that a lot of our energy producers are getting into, right? They're dipping their toe in because they're like, oh, you need a ton of energy. I'm producing energy. Let's just start mining Bitcoin. And the negative effects of it are pretty intense, you know? It's just the question is what's gonna happen to the grid if we are producing plug-in vehicles and we need to improve the grid for our plug-in vehicles, and we're also needing to improve our grid for data mining in Ithaca, and we need to improve the grid because everybody needs more redundancy because everybody has 3 devices, and what do? We're like, oh, it's not working on my iPad, I better look on my computer and then I better look on my phone, like, we all do it, But why are and we're firing to all of these different data centers, but exactly. And we're also training our Bitcoin while we're in economics class.
But there are a lot of other cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, right, there
that
are.
Don't do that.
That don't do that. I mean, so if the question is consumer response, like, look at that. If you're into crypto, consider what they're doing, how do they invest in their servers?
We do have about 10 minutes left in the panel. So are there any last questions or comments anyone wants to share? Not, we give the panelists to say some closing remarks if you would like.
Oh, I honestly, I don't think I have any closing remarks as such. I think that a lot of the things that we talked about, it's interesting that there is some overlap. And you actually talked a lot about economics in a way, a lot more than.
I was
That-
glad to see what topic you were
that-
talking about.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think for me, it really comes down to the more and more people understanding the kind of like the global effects of what each of us does on an individual basis and how, and just acknowledging that climate change is real. It's not a mythical thing that, some of us think or don't think exists. There's enough evidence to show that it is real, and just to sort of think about things that individually we do that can help make a difference. And honestly, Alexis, I never thought about the impact of, the cloud. I mean, I knew about data mining when it comes to cryptocurrencies and the heavy use of servers with that, but yeah, I just never thought about how using the cloud, that's, such a thing that we do on such a regular basis.
And there was like,
Yeah.
I'll do a plug for for NPR. On All Things Considered, I think it was like last week, they had a thing about and actually that's what inspired me to talk about it. I was like, oh yeah, this is something students might be interested in, maybe you guys are interested, but so you can listen, you can just Google All Things Considered and about AI and the negative effects of the climate. So they just had it, I think, last week. So that's my blurb.
I don't have anything else to say about Kennedy Valve, but I can tell you, outside of my job here, I am a farmer at heart. And so while I work for a large manufacturing company, my job is to still protect the environment. But at my core, I believe in protecting our environment. And I think the biggest thing that we can do as an individual right now, contributing back to the earth, is planting trees. Build that carbonaceous diaper. Put that back down into the soil. We've already maxed out. We're at our carbon limit. We're not going to come back down. We have to plant more trees. And Arbor Day is just around the corner.
So, and, I would like to add to, what other people have said about what can you do that will make a big difference for the climate? I think Miriam said it, that what we do as an individual has a limited impact, if you're just doing it by yourself, but what we do as a collective has the hugest impact. And I'll actually point back to my experience in solar over the last 8 years. That industry has grown tremendously and exponentially. And what's happened alongside that is that public opinion has shifted, and polls have shown that more people are alarmed about climate change and calling for their leaders to do something about it. And that really does moves the needle on what companies do and what policymakers do. And so I would say, like, if you want to make a difference, push for some kind of legislative change that will drive us all in the same direction.
Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you panelists for sharing your thoughts and opinions. I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you for the